Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex with my co-host here, Anthony Rivardo. Of course, big game this upcoming weekend against the Dallas Cowboys. Anthony and I were just checking out some offensive film for the Giants on the All-22, and wow, what a difference in scheme that Jason Garrett put together. A lot more to work with, a lot more unique play calls, the offensive line being the big catalyst in this game, really giving Daniel Jones a lot more time in the pocket and the receivers more time to finish off their routes, and that's been a problem this year. A lot of crossers, a lot of digs all the way to the opposite side of the field, a lot of opportunities for Daniel Jones to throw the ball because he had so much time in the pocket. That was the difference. So, I guess that's really it, man. Well, if you have a good offensive line, it translates to good wide receiver and good quarterback play because it allows those receivers to get more separation. They have more time to finish off their route. So hopefully they can continue to play at a high level, this offensive line. Andrew Thomas having just a phenomenal week. He's ranked the 8th best tackle out of all tackles in the league right now per PFF. So a great player there, making tremendous growth. And Daniel Jones winning Offensive Player of the Week in the NFC, which is just a huge accomplishment for DJ. Really getting some attention, getting some awareness, for his growth this year, Anthony. But we want to talk about Jalen Smith, linebacker from Dallas, was cut today. On Wednesday. And now, should the Giants take a gander on him? Should they take a flyer on him? Do they have the money to sign him? A lot of questions going on here. Of course, another guy is Stephon Gilmore from the Patriots. They just cut him, formerly, an all-pro level cornerback. Where will he go? Will he go to the Giants? Will he go to maybe a team like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which is where I think he'll go? But Anthony, before we dive into some of these guys, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing really good, of course. Congrats to Daniel Jones. I've been saying the Jones Chies, the franchise quarterback, Daniel Jones, NFC Offensive Player of the Week for Week 4. I mean, I was obviously ecstatic after that performance on Sunday. I was screaming all about it in our post-game live stream and throughout the podcast this week, just saying how good Daniel Jones looked, how he absolutely looked like a franchise quarterback. So I'm very happy to see the league is recognizing him as such. But now we have a little bit more pressing matters to attend to, right? A couple of players were released today. Very surprising releases. Jalen Smith, Stephon Gilmore, very good players at one point in their careers in this league. Very talented. Stephon Gilmore, it was only 2 years ago that we were saying he is by far the best cornerback in the NFL. No one can play man-to-man coverage better than Stephon Gilmore. That was only 2 years ago. Maybe not even 2 years ago. Maybe even at the start of last season we were saying that about Stephon Gilmore. Now he's been released by the Patriots, who were in some serious cap problems. They had really bad issues with their money. And of course, Jalen Smith, a player who 2019 was a Pro Bowler, very good player for Dallas, also released after only 4 games. Very interesting stuff here. And a couple of players that the Giants really might want to take an interest in and might want to consider picking up the phone and calling their agents. Very interested to see if the Giants do end up doing that, but going to have a good discussion about them today. And Alex and I are going to decide whether or not we want the Giants to pursue these two pretty talented players.
Right, so let's just get Stephon Gilmore out of the way right now because it's going to be more of a shorter conversation. The Giants probably aren't going that route, right? Unless these guys sign for minimum deals, the Giants really just can't afford them. They don't have much money. So I imagine Stephon Gilmore is going to want a little bit more than a veteran minimum deal. He's a very talented player. Probably a guy that will go to a team like the Buccaneers, who desperately need cornerback help right now after, Jamel Dean and Murphy Bunting, some of their main guys going down early this season. Now they have Richard Sherman, who hasn't played or didn't go to training camp at all or any preseason, coming in and trying to fit that mold and fill that void for them. And he got tortured last game. So, this is a team that's trying to find a way around that cornerback spot right now with some injuries. And it makes a lot of sense for Stephon Gilmore to go there. The Giants don't necessarily need him. They have Adoree Jackson. They have James Bradbury. Stephon Gilmore, reportedly, I saw, wants to go to the Green Bay Packers. He's hit them up and, inquired about them. So I don't think the Giants need him. They don't have the money for him. And, he wants to go to a team where he's going to make an impact as soon as possible. He won't be able to do that with the Giants, unfortunately. They just don't have a spot for him unless they put Adoree Jackson in the slot and they have Stephon Gilmore on the outside. I just don't see it. That doesn't mean he isn't a great player. I think the Patriots just want to go a little bit younger. They have some guys up and coming like J.C. Jackson. And I think they have some talent there and they want to exercise it. They want to see where that's going. They want to start building because Stephon Gilmore, he's on the final year of his deal. Really no point for him to come in there and kind of disrupt the development of some of their young players. So Anthony, when you're looking at Gilmore, do you think he's a fit for us? Or do you think he's going to a team like Green Bay, who just, Jair Alexander had an injury last game? I think it was a hand issue. And then, the Buccaneers, who obviously need desperate help at cornerback.
Yeah, so I think the thing with Stephon Gilmore is he's not going to be an option for the Giants because the Giants are not an option for him. He wants to go to a contender. He wants to win now. So he's going to be looking at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers of the world, the Green Bay Packers of the world, and all of those high-level teams, probably even the Kansas City Chiefs. He might even consider the Ravens. But the Giants at 1-3, unfortunately, not contenders right now, not looking to be contenders anytime soon this season. Even though we did get our first win, we're very happy about that. They're not one of those elite teams in the league right now, and it seems like Stephon Gilmore wants to go to one of those elite teams. So for the Giants, if they were to have interest in him and somehow pull it off, I wouldn't be upset about it. No, I mean, if you guys remember in the offseason, before we signed Adoree Jackson, before we signed anybody in free agency, this was very early on in the offseason, there were some trade rumors about Stephon Gilmore that were swirling around that I did pitch on this podcast that the Giants should consider trying to trade for Stephon Gilmore and locking down that cornerback position opposite of James Bradberry. Of course, they did lock down that position with the signing of Adoree Jackson instead. But if they were to go after Stephon Gilmore right now, I wouldn't be upset about it. Presumably, he would be your outside cornerback opposite of James Bradberry, and Adoree Jackson go into the slot, just like Alex mentioned. And I don't think that's a bad idea at all. I think that would be really good. I think the Giants arguably have the best secondary in the NFL as long as they start playing consistent. I mean, that's definitely on paper one of the most talented secondaries in the NFL. But right now, where the Giants are at with money and where Stephon Gilmore is at in terms of wanting to play for a contender, it just doesn't sound like a possibility. It doesn't sound like something that will happen. But of course, I do think Stephon Gilmore is a very talented player. Wherever he goes, he's going to make a significant impact with whichever team he decides to sign with.
Yeah, and the Giants, I'm looking at it right here. They have $1.24 million in cap space, maybe a little bit more after James Bradberry opened up some money for them, a couple million. So, they just don't have much. One thing they could consider doing is cutting Sam Beal once and for all. The guy's been on the roster too long and he hasn't made an impact. I say, right now, if they cut him, they're going to save $850K. Maybe they can roll that over to another player like Stephon Gilmore, but I just think he's going to be making too much. I don't think that he is a guy that's going to take a bargain deal. That's where I think Jalen Smith comes in. I do want to discuss him, obviously. Jalen Smith, guys, is kind of a polarizing player, right? He's a guy that was a Pro Bowl level middle linebacker in 2019. He's more of a middle linebacker, plays a 4-3 with Dallas. How do they really expect him to translate over to a 3-4 scheme? He can play that middle linebacker run stopping role, right? He's not a bad tackler. He's never had a missed tackle rate over 10% before, which, Blake Martinez has. So he's actually a pretty solid tackler in that regard. He doesn't miss many. He's a good run stuffer. But I will say his coverage ability is definitely a big question mark. He's not very good in coverage. Very, very, very small sample size this year, only being targeted 10 times, but he did give up 9 completions for 63 yards. And last year, in 2020, he gave up 42 completions on 59 targets for 438 yards and 3 touchdowns. He did pick up a fumble, and I think he had an interception as well. So, looking at him, he's not good in coverage. That's not how you use Jalen Smith, though, right? He had a 5.5% missed tackle rate. He had 154 tackles last year, 142 the year before that. With a 7.8% missed tackle rate. He's a good tackler. Like, that's one of his best attributes. He doesn't miss tackles. The problem is, maybe that old injury, that old torn ACL he had back in the day is starting to kind of creep up on him. Maybe it's starting to make an impact with his agility and quickness. But the Giants, what's the harm? I don't see, a lot of people will say, we don't want him, he's washed, whatever. And he totally might be, right? But what's the harm in bringing him in on a veteran deal that's maybe incentive laden with not much, with no guarantees? If they cut him, they save all the money, and worst case scenario, he comes over and he gives you some good insight on the Dallas this upcoming weekend. That's kind of how I feel about it. So I think that Jalen Smith as a player definitely isn't somebody you maybe want starting, but he's not a bad player. He hasn't been a bad run stopper entirely. He's really just not good in coverage, and the Giants can kind of use him in ways that take him out of coverage, right? They can use Tate Crowder more in that role. So I'm curious, Anthony, to hear what you have to say. Like, what do you think about Jalen Smith? Is it worth taking a shot? If there's a no guaranteed contract with incentives, I'm 100% for it. There's nothing to lose.
So from what I understand, he's already been paid in excess of $7 million guaranteed by the Dallas Cowboys, or at least that's what he'll be getting for the season. So for Jalen Smith, no one's going to pay him money because they know he's getting paid money. So they're just going to give him the veteran minimum. No matter where he signs, it seems very likely from what I was reading online that he's just going to sign for the veteran minimum and go ahead and play on that contract while still getting money from the Dallas Cowboys for all the guarantees that he gave him with his big extension in 2019. Now, one interesting thing that you mentioned is that he's not very good in coverage. And I think that's really weird because back in 2019, when he got paid for being one of the best coverage linebackers in the NFL. He was really top tier in coverage. I don't know what exactly happened to him between now and then. And I know that last year he also struggled in coverage, but 2018 and 19, he was phenomenal in coverage. 2020 and 21, everything went awry for him. He just was terrible in coverage. And I don't know exactly what happened there, but I do have to think maybe to some extent it has something to do with scheme. I know that the Dallas Cowboys did change their head coach. Obviously, Jason Garrett is now a member of the Giants, no longer the head coach of Dallas, and they did change their scheme. They hired Dan Quinn as their defensive coordinator in 2020, and I think that might have been kind of one of those situations where you had a player who was really talented in one scheme, he enters a new scheme, and it's just not a match. It just doesn't fit. And I think that might be the case with Jalen Smith. Leighton Vander Esch, too, even. Those two were both top 10 linebackers in the NFL in 2019. Neither one of them has played like a top 10 linebacker since 2019. And I have to think that might be due to the scheme. So for the Giants taking a look at Jalen Smith potentially, I think what they would say is, well, he might not have fit into Dan Quinn's scheme, a 4-3 scheme, but he might just fit in our 3-4, 3-3-5 odd hybrid scheme over here. And one of the reasons why I think that he might is because, as you mentioned, Alex, the Giants linebackers are very key on stopping the run. The Giants linebackers are not often asked to go out there and play a lot of coverage. I think Tay Crowder last week only played like 10 coverage snaps. He was only targeted he really doesn't even drop back that much, the linebackers in the Giants defense. They're blitzing, they're defending the run. That's their primary purpose. And Jalen Smith defends the run well still to this point in his career. And he's a pretty good blitzer, very athletic player from that linebacker position. And when you're looking at it from the Giants standpoint, Blake Martinez tore his ACL. Tay Crowder's playing injured. He has a hamstring injury. Reggie Ragland, okay, replacement level player. Carter Coughlin, okay, decent young player that we're trying to develop. Right. So with Jalen Smith, what exactly are we bringing in? What's the negatives to bringing this guy in? The positive, it's high risk, low reward, right? Everybody's ecstatic over the signing of John Ross because he played on Sunday and looked phenomenal. What did we say about that? Low risk, high reward. You're not paying him a lot of money, but if he goes out there and he plays well and he's healthy, he's going to make an impact, and there's a chance that he makes a significant impact. Same principle applies to Jalen Smith. The worst that he can do is go out there and play worse than who we have on the roster. Okay, then he gets buried on the depth chart, or we cut him again and we only lose $500,000 on the veteran minimum. But if he plays better than the guys that we have, okay, then we're paying the veteran minimum for a once great linebacker who's now returning back to that level of play for a very cheap contract, and he's going to play better than who we have. So I think for the Giants, it makes complete sense. They should be calling Jalen Smith. They should be getting him on the next flight to Newark, and they should be signing him, in my opinion. This is something that the Giants should get done as soon as possible because this is a player, again, at one point was a very good player, a top 10 linebacker in the NFL. Only 2 years ago. Same thing with Stephon Gilmore. There's no way that these guys just washed up that fast. And if they did, okay, pay them a very small amount and find out. You can pay them a very small amount, let them play for a couple of weeks. If they start to come back to form, great. You are paying a great linebacker a very cheap contract. If he doesn't come back to form, okay, you wasted $500,000 on a linebacker who's washed and is going to be buried on your depth chart. Who doesn't do that? That's fine. That's the low risk, high reward principle that the Giants applied to John Ross and felt very good about. If you want to take an example of it not panning out, because it might not pan out if they were to sign Jalen Smith, low risk, high reward, Afadi Odenigbo. They signed him. He didn't pan out. They cut him. They got most of their money back. It's as simple as that. So for Jalen Smith and the New York Giants, it sounds like a perfect marriage right here. The Giants have need at linebacker with all the injuries that they're suffering. Lack of depth there, and it sounds like you've got one of these once really talented players just sitting on the market, ready to find a new home, and I think that his new home should be in New Jersey with the Giants. I think it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and I'll say this, I'm looking at the kind of the numbers and why the Cowboys did it. I think they just felt good about Jabril Cox. They felt good about Leighton Vander Esch. So I think, when they were looking at his contract, they said, he's going to make $7.2 million this year. Let's just pay him out. Let's get him off the team, because he refused to non-guarantee his 2022 season due to injury, right? So like essentially what they're saying is Smith's contract was guaranteed for injury for 2022. He was scheduled to make 9.2 million in base salary and count 11.8 million against the salary cap next season. They probably were like, you know what, Jabril Cox has been looking good. I think we think he can fill that role. Let's just get that money off and we can spend it next year and just not worry about it. So I think they were just wanted to rather eat the dead cap this year. So I get it. It seems to me like it was more of a financial move than it was anything else. And the Cowboys said that or at least I was reading, I forget who I was reading from today. Let me go find it really quickly. But essentially, from Jane Slater, she was basically like, they tried to trade him. It didn't really work out. Nobody wanted him because of the big cap hit that he has this season. And basically, the Cowboys said he did everything we asked him to. Right, like the play of Keanu Neal, Leighton Vander Esch, and Jabril Cox kind of led them to move on and save that money. But end of the day, like he's a pretty good guy to have in the locker room. Apparently, like he does all the right things, he says the right things. Like he's not a bad person by any means. He's just maybe not worth that money anymore. But if the Giants are not paying that much money, they're going to be paying him a veteran minimum deal, maybe. Like I said, what's the harm? With losing Blake Martinez is a big deal. Maybe Jalen Smith comes in here and he offers something a little bit different, offers competition. I don't like handing out starting jobs to people. That's one of the things that hurt me the most last year. We're just handing out wide receiver jobs, handing out offensive lineman jobs without any competition, or next to none, which is really not great for the progression of a team. So I like the idea of bringing him in. It seems like a really cheap contract that he would be on. And Anthony, is there any other kind of objection to the idea that you can think of?
Honestly, the only objection would have been character
Scheme related,
issues, but
maybe?
there aren't any character issues. Scheme related, I think that he can fit into the scheme just fine because he's a good run defender. He's a disciplined run defender that knows the gaps and knows how to plug them. So he's a veteran, he's a smart player, and again, he's very athletic. And in Patrick Graham's scheme, you do have to be pretty athletic. So Jalen Smith has that athleticism, and based on that, and based on decent run defending over the past couple of years, I think he's a scheme fit. I don't see any reason for him not to be. I think that this is, again, a perfect thing for the Giants. You have some depth issues at inside linebacker. You need, a player to come in. Jalen Smith is a perfect player for that, right? Like this is almost like sent from the gods. This is like Giants inside linebacker injury. We need an inside linebacker. Cowboys cut it once a great inside linebacker, make him available for the Giants. The Giants should scoop this up instantly, in my opinion. I really think that this
Just for the
deal should get
knowledge.
done, hopefully before Sunday. Yeah, even just for the knowledge, sign him. You're playing Dallas on Sunday. Sign the former Dallas linebacker to a contract. Ask him, hey, what do you know about this defense? What can you give us in practice so Daniel Jones can kind of get a simulated feel for Dallas's defense? What kind of nuances and in the scheme can you provide for us? And then can you also go out there and play some decent football, right? It's perfect. I think it's a perfect idea. And I really think the Giants should get it done within the next 24 hours so that he can play on Sunday versus his former team, the Dallas Cowboys.
That, and also I'm looking at Tate Crowder's numbers right now, and he got beat up last game. I mean, he's playing with a hamstring injury, so bringing another guy to help supplement that issue could be a good idea. He missed 3 tackles, 25% of his attempts last week, and he's a 10.3% missed tackle rate this year. In coverage, he's given up 11 receptions on 11 targets for 143 yards, including that really, really important one against Washington to J.D. McKissick at the sideline, if you recall. So it's not like Tate Crowder's been great in coverage either. He's been pretty bad for the most part. But he's done a good job stuffing the run. That's really what his application has been. So I don't hate Tate Crowder. I think he's a pretty solid average player. But again, he also has the hamstring injury, which has been, hurting his progression, hurting his performance. So I think that bringing in a guy who's healthy right now can't be a bad idea, right?
Yeah, I'm going to have to go ahead and jump in there real quick and break a little bit of news to you, Alex. Stephon Gilmore was just traded to the Carolina Panthers for the 2023 sixth round pick, I believe. So, guess everything we said about the Giants. Good thing we kept it short on the Stephon Gilmore's to the Giants
He also
area,
said he
but
would not be coming here. So I
yeah,
mean, we
he
knew
wanted to
that.
go to a contender, and honestly, the Panthers look like they might be contending this year. They're
Well,
pretty
because they
damn
lost,
good. Their defense is legit. So, yeah, J.C. Horn
the
has been
rookie.
injured. J.C. Horn is injured. He'll come back sometime this season, but he does have a foot injury. And I guess Stephon Gilmore is going to fill in the meantime. And once J.C. Horn's healthy again, those two can make a perfect marriage on the outside cornerback position for Carolina. So Carolina's once scary defense just got terrifying right in time for Halloween.
Yeah, that was a good one. I'll give you some credit for that. Some nicely done there, sir. Um, but guys, hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Kind of taking a look at Jalen Smith, what he has to offer. If the Giants should take a flyer on him, personally, if it's cheap, minimum deal, why the hell not? You know, you have Tay Crowder who's dealing with a hamstring injury, Reggie Ragland, whom I don't trust to begin with. Jalen Smith knows Dallas. This is the perfect week to bring a guy like that in, get some inside information, maybe on what they like to do on offense, maybe what they like to do on defense, take advantage of some mismatches. This is a perfect opportunity. I mean, Joe Judge loves every advantage, right? He wants every single advantage he can get. This is a pretty damn big one. And if you're going to bring in Isaiah Wilson, who, of course, after all the shit he did, this should be a no-brainer, right? After all the stuff Isaiah Wilson has done, after all the people that said stay away from this guy, Jalen Smith should be an easy signing for the Giants, right? It should be a layup. The potential is there for him to replace one of those two guys. I'd preferably Ragland if he can play well, or at least just compete. You know, at least put some pressure on him and let the best man win. On a minimum deal, hell, I'm down for it. You can't really go wrong. But guys, make sure to subscribe below on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Tomorrow we'll be rolling out with an awesome film breakdown of the wide receivers, taking a look at Kadarius Toney, Kenny Galladay. Of course, we'll have some Saquon Barkley, that 54-yard catch, John Ross on that long ball, DJ looking really sharp. Really excited to take a look at these guys because we know how well they played. And of course, you're going to see on the All-22 how well Andrew Thomas played as well. And it's going to show up pretty damn often because he locked down Cam Jordan the entire game. So really excited to dive into that film for you guys. Tomorrow that will be coming out. Keep tuned as always, and we'll catch you guys on Thursday.